Season's greetings. It is the most wonderful time of the year, folks. And on that note, Russ has something to say.
So yesterday, Disney had their shareholders meeting and started rolling out what like their next 10 years of movies are going to look like. And just thinking about like 10 years of Star Wars scared me. Like it was just too much of a commitment to think about on one particular day. But the one thing I don't know if they really thought about was bringing Hayden Christensen back as Darth Vader, because he's really often looked at as maybe the worst or second worst actor ever to be in a Star Wars movie. Now, playing Darth Vader is good if you want to get that Darth Vader heat, but you still have to be a good actor, and he's not a good actor, and fans are not happy about this.
No. Wow, I didn't even know that was happening. I missed that whole thing. That's so they're bringing back so he was like Anakin in the prequels.
Correct.
In the second and the third.
Yeah.
And then Obi-Wan's coming back too. The actor who's the actor?
Mike? Bring Ewan McGregor back.
McGregor, who everybody loved. Like that's good,
right? But see, I traditionally I'm never hot or cold about anything. It's like, or I am hot or cold about things. I'm not in the middle. And the previews yesterday came out for a Star Wars. Now, it wasn't really a preview because all it was the director of the movie saying that she's directing the next Star Wars.
Patty Jenkins, yeah. She's Jenkins. A director, yeah.
And, right, and she directed Wonder Woman, so I'm sure it's going to be good. But really, I'm nonplussed about Star Wars after the last couple movies, and they're really with the Mandalorian and all these other things. Disney is really going to town. You're going to get Star Wars up the yin yang for the next 5 to 6 years. It's going to be ridiculous.
I mean, I'll tell you what my argument is. I get less stressed that way about Marvel because like, these characters were developed a long time ago.
But like that was my point, Ross. I saw the Loki preview. I saw the one for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'm in. Those were great. Right. Star Wars, they're beating it to death, and I hate when they do that because
it's almost going to be like, hey, you remember that guy who fixed the aircraft in that movie? Now we did a series about him. You want to learn about him, and it's like, I don't know if I want to.
Yeah,
I don't know where they're going to go exactly. You know, like I mean,
well, I can tell you,
if they did an Ewok movie, I wouldn't watch it.
Heck, the only Star Wars movie after the original 3 that I thought was really well done and good was Rogue One. Other than that, I thought everything else has been bad.
I thought they were all good. Like, were they all spectacular? No, but they were good.
Rogue One was a better movie. I do agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
In terms of, but you know what's interesting? So, the worst, to tie this in with Christmas for a second, the worst ever Christmas special is the Star Wars Christmas special.
It is.
I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it is.
And the funniest part is with Chewbacca and the rest of his family, because it's just like 10 minutes of them going.
Yeah, if you want to watch something that's absolutely, hilarious, and that is, my buddies. I'm friends with 2 of the guys who do the Mystery Science Theater and Riff Tracks things. Yeah. And if you want to watch something funny, their version, they riff tracks the Star Wars Holiday Special. With like 1980s or 70s, whatever it was.
I think it was right after the first one.
Yeah, it was right. It was right after. It was before anything else was done. So it was the next thing that happened after Star Wars came out. And they riff tracked it with all the commercials.
I might watch that.
It was on like CBS. It was on CBS, and all the 80s commercials or 70s commercials whenever that came out. 70s, 80s.
One last thing I want to ask Kevin this, because everybody, I think at this point, 9 months into the pandemic, has run out of things to watch. If you have Netflix, if you have Hulu, Amazon Prime, whatever, you were going to town on whatever was out there, the Queen's Gambit or The Crown, have you run out of things to watch, or is it something? Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I purposely I've been committed to The Crown, so I hadn't seen the 4th season, and now I'm in the middle of that, which really helps. And I used to be such a binge watcher, and I've tried to not do that so I could, savor some of these.
You see, we ripped through the British Baking Show now too, and we started to hit a wall. The new Cranston series on Showtime, we just started that, so that's gonna help ease the burden a little, but it's getting thin out there.
I watched the Nicole Kidman.
The Undoing.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
I didn't either. I got to the end of it and I was sort of disappointed. But I was going to make a point about to Mike about, because I agree with what Mike said about the Star Wars, and I watched all the Star Wars. I've watched, and I was a Star Trek guy as well. But the only difference between me and you is that I rank them sort of in my head, but I would never say I'm not going to watch them because the way I view it is sometimes, and it's the same thing, and this is the reason I think like that. And you should know too, because you're a writer. Sometimes you write something that's really, really good, and sometimes you just write a story, and it doesn't work out as well. And sometimes people will call you out on that, but most of the time they get that sometimes a story is just a story, and it's not the best of all time. Well, that's how I feel about Star Wars and the rest of them. I'll go and see them, plunk my money down. Some do I enjoy? I think they hit it out of the park, and some I go, sure. But I don't say, well, that was a waste of $15 or
right.
Yeah, I never said that. No,
I mean, I worked at a movie theater, so it's like I basically got to see everything for free between 1985 and 1995. So, and it's one of these deals where I liked all 3 Star Wars movies, but the Star Treks, the first one was horrible. The second one was The Wrath of Khan was great. It was probably the best of the Star Trek movies. The third one, when Spock comes back to life, was bad, and then the fourth one with the whales was great. So it was like every other one.
I stopped after that one. I gave up after that.
Well, yeah, please. When you have Christopher Plummer dressed up as a Klingon quoting Shakespeare.
Well, this is actually funny because what I started watching, which is as a mutual friend of Kevin and mine, told me I have never watched anything of the Star Trek world.
Oh my God!
Wow,
nothing, like zero Star Trek. I don't know why. It's just like one of those things.
I grew up in an era where you had it on TV.
I grew up in the era when it was on TV. I just didn't like it. When I still watch
the old episodes.
I know. So that's what I started doing with my kids. I started watching the episodes. Like to start there, and it's just funny.
Yeah. That reminds me of being in college, and when sometimes back then you'd play the drinking game, and you made everybody drink if you had not done something that everyone had done. And I always got them on. I had never seen an episode of Mork and Mindy because I was in college, and I just I was working, so I had never seen an episode. And
here's my suggestion to Richard Petrowski in this chat room, because he said first Star Trek was a snore. Watch it as a comedy, and it'll change you.
Oh, but it's a 3 hour.
It's so badly done that it makes me laugh out loud.
They try. You know what they tried to do, and then we'll start the show. What they tried to do, the director of that movie tried to make it as sort of like a 2001.
No, not the movie. The first series.
Oh no, the
first series comedy, because the acting is so bad that it makes me laugh.
You just got to put it in context.
The fight scenes are awful.
They're watching right now.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous comment. You got to remember when it was filmed.
Right, Russ.
I'm going through it now.
I thought that at 10 years old, Kevin.
They were made in 1967. No, I'll grant.
Shatner's acting is horrible in it,
but
it makes me laugh.
It's so bad, it's good. That's
that's what it is.
I mean, it's really not that bad. I mean, that's how it was back then.
Right.
Having grown up in that.
So Scotty had to say 100 times there's trouble in the engine room and never fix it.
That's just the way that they did things back then. I mean,
there's and then we'll start. There was a fight scene in one of the episodes. I'll look it up. I think it's called A Wolf in the Fold. It's about basically a spirit that goes into each person's body, and it turns like it was Jack the Ripper. And well, anyway, there's a bald character who gets into a fight with Kirk. He comes around the desk, and it's so bad that the stuntman was wearing like a plastic bald head. That it was such a bad edit that it is laughable. I will. I'm sure it's on YouTube.
There was so much involved in those plots that was so kind of over the top for that time. The interracial kiss.
There's those kinds of things. I get that.
It was amazing. I'm watching. Oh, I've told you this before. I'm going through the series Combat, which I watched when I was. And it's the same thing on that. Like, they were way ahead of their time on dealing with racism and anti-war sentiments, and the idea of atrocities, and all kinds of things that you would never have thought they would have done in the 1960s. But
well, I'll tell you how the mores of television have changed. I've been watching like all old Law and Orders on like a couple of the channels and online, and the old Law and Orders on like Sundance Channel or whatever. They've edited out phrases that were non-offensive in the early 90s or whenever it started, but now they are offensive, so they've bleeped them or changed them.
Yeah, I don't believe you'd be able to show the show F Troop anymore. I think that would be like banned from television.
You can't show your kids any movies from the 80s. Like none. For what it's worth. Like I tried like the other day. What was I trying to show? I was trying to show my son
Ferris Bueller?
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which I thought
that's a good one.
Funny movie at the time.
It's a great movie.
You can't even watch. I mean, there's you know, and it's fun, and you know, I'm not saying it's wrong because you know it's not.
But it makes me mad because my dad made me sit through these black and white movies. Why can't your kids sit through these movies?
They'll sit through them, but you know, like when you watch something through their eyes because they see the world.
Yeah.
There's a much higher level of correctness. People are going to call it politically correct. I think it's just actually I just call it kindness. There's a much higher level of kind, and in general, and we're not at the point yet. You know, they're not at the point where they can laugh at that. You know, from the opposite side of it. So it's like. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you can't. I couldn't get. I thought that movie. I'm like that. You know, I'm trying to find a holiday movie. I'm like that movie. I think I can watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I think we can probably watch that, and I couldn't.
Christmas Vacation. You could do.
No way, not a chance.
Really?
Scrooge again. Scrooge was. We tried that one too. We did. That's another one we tried. It's pretty funny.
Well, something's wrong with your family then.
Yep. Let's move on.
I guess so. All right, here we go. It's very possible, Mike. It's very possible. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, December 11th, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and I actually met John Candy and Steve Martin when they were filming Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Wow, that's cool. I'm Russ Cohen. That's it.
Kevin Allen.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And before we get to our topic, which is a big topic, I did something hockey related that I wanted to throw in, but I was going to talk in the pre-show, but I wanted to talk about it now. So last night, first night of Hanukkah here, I gave my son he's a huge Lego person. And the traditional first night of Hanukkah gift is a giant Lego set. And my wife and son have been doing Lego sets since as long as I can remember. And they haven't done one in a year, you know, since last, and they just had the best time, which left me with a weird night of like nothing.
Picking them up?
Of nothing happened, nothing going on, like me by myself, you know, in my office working for a little bit, then watching TV for a little bit, then like flipping through Canadian television, trying to find. I watched a little bit of this weird Canadian channel, like their version of Shark Tank called Dragon something.
Dragon's Den.
Yep. And then I ended up thinking, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to watch from beginning to end one of the more interesting games from last year. Hockey. I'm going to try to find an interesting hockey game. I tweeted this out. So I watched the January 11th Edmonton Oilers versus Calgary Flames game, which was a game that, you know, if you remember, that's the big game where you get the big fight between Tkachuk, where Tkachuk's getting thrown around on the ice by I can't think of his name.
Oh, Zach Kassian.
Thank you. And that it was the first time in like 10 years those two teams had played for first place in a game. Like they kept talking about that on Hockey Night in Canada. Whoever wins this game is going to be in first place.
It was a big deal, yeah.
Yeah, and it was an incredibly exciting game. A lot of things like came through it, and I think that it's something I might want to do in the future with you guys. Like at some point, like pick a game that you know has that one of the more influential games. I found this website that just this guy who listed 10 games that had meaning in last season, and this was the first one on that.
That's all he could find was 10.
Well, 10 real meaning
okay.
games.
All right.
You know, and it's fun to watch them again, you know, knowing that, you know, that they're meaningful and seeing what you can get out of them and seeing how they can play it. And you really got to see a lot of, you know, how good Calgary was at that point. Like Calgary was a very good team. You know, I've watched TJ Brody a little bit differently because obviously Brody's now a Leaf. So I'm looking at him. I'm like, okay, how am I going to see him play? The talents of Draisaitl, you know, and McDavid's speed, obviously. And the fact that McDavid's playing with James Neal, you know, obviously Neal had a great season. We all remember this. But
no. He had a great start to the season.
At that point, he's still playing with James Neal. He's got like a lot of goals at that point.
Yes.
And you know, and when he's playing with Neal and Zach Kassian, you know, so when you know when Kassian gets he gets kicked out with something I haven't seen forever, which is like 16 minutes in penalties. Like, like he like sits out like the entire 4-minute power play and then 10 more minutes and 2 more minutes after that, I think. And he returns, of course, to when you see the fight. But it was and getting to see Cam Talbot, who at that time was hot as hell. Like, he was playing really well. It was just interesting to do. So I think in the future we'll do that at some point. But it was
so.
It was fun to watch. The main topic today that we want to get to is this report by John Shannon, and it's and other people are picking up on it now too, that the NHL is planning on buying vaccines, for their teams and people, right?
Well, let me read the clarification and then the other tweet that came out from.
Yeah, there's other things too. So go ahead.
From Rick Westhead from TSN, John Shannon first tweeted out that the NHL was planning to privately purchase the COVID vaccine for all the constituents involved for the potential upcoming season. Then he clarified the NHL is interested in securing the vaccine when and if it's available for private purchase. Is it at this point? No. The league is also adamant that they basically wouldn't jump in line. Now, Rick Westhead tweeted this morning, doctors say they suspect pro sports leagues are exploring the private purchases of COVID-19 vaccines, and the Public Health Agency of Canada tells me it can't stop pharma companies from selling their vaccines to a private enterprise. Right. So let's talk about this. And Kevin, the morality of this.
Yeah.
That should professional leagues be doing this? Should these companies be selling it privately?
Well, I think it's America, and we're a capitalist country, and so I think they have the right to do that. And I'm sure their argument will be, if you're willing to pay full freight, they'll be happy to sell it to you.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're the NHL and you've been dealing with this pandemic like this country has, and that when people sat down to determine who should get it first, it was determined first responders, should get it first, and then followed by the elderly, particularly in the nursing homes. Like, you just can't get in the middle of all that. Like, if we get to the point where the general public is getting it, and then you want to go out because you don't want to send your players down to CVS or wherever it is that the rest of us are going to get it, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and buy it. But any thought of jumping into those people who really need it because of compromised, health issues, or then that's just morally wrong. I'm glad to see that they've clarified that they wouldn't do that. So I'm disappointed if I read otherwise. So.
I'll tell you what, before the clarification, I did retweet over that saying as it should be, meaning it purchasing it privately. Now, I'll tell you where my brain went, though. The other day, Pfizer said that, hey, in this country, they asked if the U.S. wanted a second order, and the government said no. Basically, the presidency, the White House said no. And I think they put that out there because I think when they're done allocating in the next couple of weeks for exactly what you said, Kev, I think they are going to sell privately. And I don't know if it'll all come from Pfizer, because we also have to remember there's a third and fourth company who's to say by the middle of January they're not ready to produce. So I get the shock part. I don't want them to cut the line either, but I really didn't think they were going to. I was actually surprised at how many people felt like they were going to, because that's really not been the NHL style.
Yeah, I didn't think that either. But
it hasn't been their style.
Forget the jumping the line for a second. Let's just assume, okay, all the first responders and the elderly, the people who need this, get it first. Let's just assume that for a second.
Right.
And then let's jump to the general public. Boy, this vaccine thing feels like a huge, terrible thing in general. Like, all around, you can see where this is going to go, right? You can see the bad. You can see every possible bad thing. I mean, wealthy companies, what's to stop them from buying it? Immediately you're going to see the divide between the poor and the rich. You're going to see that. It's just and with the poor people in this country getting and dying of the disease more often, and around the world, the rich being able to jump up and get it before them. There are so many problems with this, and you can see where this is going to go to something that just almost should make it. The government should almost step in and say that this can't be privatized.
Well,
even if they do that, these rich companies will still get it. they'll still buy it. They'll still find a way to buy it.
Well, I was going to say there could be a black market that
There will be a black market. There's no question about it. But the other thing about that, though, but when you look at the NHL, I talked to somebody there, and they said one of their issues with one of the reasons that they may, that they would think that they're considering doing this in the first place was they've got all people from all different nationalities, playing on their teams, and the reality is, they don't know when a guy from, when a Russian player who's living here will be able to get it, or when, or if a Canadian will be able to get it before an American before a Canadian. So the concept of giving it to all of their people at once is, makes sense. And I get that.
Well,
but it's not like they got to report back to their home country to get it.
Right.
So,
it depends, doesn't it? I mean, how are you going to, we don't know. Do we really know? I mean, you're going to have to prove your American citizenship when you get this thing. What's going to be the deal?
No.
But I will tell you, I got a report today from New Jersey on how they're going to do it. And they went from A to Z. And when I looked at it for someone like me, even at my age, I'm probably last in line. And that's fine by me. But I do think that we can't expect that just because a company has said, hey, this is what we have and this is what our plan is, that is the only vaccines they have. That's the only ones they produce. They're not going to produce any others, and they're not going to do anything else with it, because I think we have to remember they're corporations. Corporations don't work that way.
First of all, the NHL will not be alone in this. The NFL will buy.
No, they're all going to do it.
The NBA will do it.
It's not going to just be
maybe Major League Baseball won't do it because the season doesn't start until April, so they'll hold off on it. But I mean, I think the PR nightmare would be if it's found out that they do jump in line. If they do that, then I think a lot of people will be pissed off. But what I'm going to be interested in here, and there are players. I'm sure there are players in the NHL who are anti-vaxxers. I'm sure there are players who are very concerned about what they put in their bodies. Is this something that is going to be mandated by the NHL and the PA when they come to their agreement about, you need to take this vaccine? If we get it, you need to take it.
Yeah, that certainly is going to be an issue. I mean, it's going to be an issue in our country. So, it's going to be a issue. The one thing that I'm heartened by is how much discussion is going into how we're going to distribute this vaccine. If you look at it just from the fact that, as everyone probably knows, because we're paying more attention to this than we probably ever have about any vaccine before, you need 2 doses of it. So, right out of the gate, there's been a debate of whether or not you give that to the first, 50 million. Do you give 25 million doses? Do you give 50 million doses out and then wait to get others to give that second dose, or do you give 25 million doses and have that other 25 people to take? Like, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal.
What it is too, Kev? They don't know yet. They've done a lot of testing, but the only testing that they don't know is after you've taken the vaccine, can you still transmit it to somebody else? Right.
And it's also, there's a lot of confusion about whether it prevents you from getting coronavirus or prevents you from having the symptoms.
Right. That's what Russ is talking about. Yeah. Whether or not you'd be even to, transmit it. So that's the way they want to do it. But it is interesting. I listened to, it wasn't the whole distribution. It was about how when you get the vaccine, you'll be required to stay for 30 minutes, much like an allergy shot. I never had allergy shots, but apparently when you get an allergy shot, you must remain.
Yeah, my brother did, so I used to watch them.
Yeah, you have to wait for 30 minutes to make sure there's no
reaction. See if you're going to break out or,
like a flu shot where you go to Kroger and they stick you.
Right.
And then you just walk out.
I just had one. You're right. They don't even care. It's like, okay, see ya.
I can't imagine that they're going to give this vaccine at the supermarket or at the drugstore. I would assume that.
No, yeah, they are.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. CVS has been contracted to do the nursing homes.
Right. But CVS said it's not going to be in their stores. They said it's going to be at some other type of location.
Right. Well, it's going to be like, that's the thing too. Was reading on Facebook about how difficult it is to get a test in New Jersey. In Michigan here, we're a state of 10 million people. I can get COVID tested 4 places within a mile of my home.
Yeah.
I have one place by me and I'm in New Jersey, but I'm in southern Jersey, it's not hard at all. They've been doing it like once a week for the last couple of months, but
we have 4 different places, but both the drugstores in my area within, do it.
Okay.
Urgent care, like everybody does it, and the college does, and everything else. Ultimately here. Now in Michigan, Pfizer is located in Kalamazoo, which is about 13 miles from my lake house is. So I'm going to be at the epicenter of producing this.
I know where they're going to distribute the vaccine in Cheektowaga, the Chick-fil-A around the corner from me that has a line around the block. You'll get yourself a spicy chicken sandwich, a frozen lemonade, and a COVID vaccine.
No, but you know what? I will say with Kevin, the one thing that's opened my eyes with this whole thing is this should be one subject that the entire world can get behind, because nobody in the world has conquered this. Nobody. And so every country needs this. Everybody, and yet it's still not, we're not all still embracing it. There are people that are actually, I just read today, there are people that are actually faking like the vaccine's not going to work, or it didn't work after they got it, because they're just bad people. I mean, there's going to be all of that, like X said.
Well, yeah. This morning I saw the list of initially the United States had committed to buy from 8 different companies. Well, this morning 2 of them announced that they're going to be a year away now because they've had issues. They didn't get the antibody amounts in elderly people, and that was one of the concerns about this virus. And in Moderna and Pfizer did, but this other ones didn't. So now that leaves us short on what we were going to buy. So they're going to have to go back to one of the other companies and say we need to increase our order. So it's a complicated deal, but to bring us full circle back with the sports. The other thing that should be brought up, and why this is such a moral and an ethical decision, athletes are probably the least likely of human beings. I mean, they're perfectly healthy. Now that doesn't mean they shouldn't be vaccinated, because they can, as it turns out that you can't spread it on that that's better for the country, and you're developing herd immunity. But they really need to be, that little app. I haven't gone on it, but I've seen other reporters have gone on, and they're ranked 269 millionth or whatever it is to get the vaccine. I would say athletes would be after 300 million of the people at the I mean, and athletes, college students, all different. I mean, younger. It's amazing. Like all the kids at my daughter's college, so many of them did get it. None of them had bad effects from it. They could spread it to people who could. But you're right. I mean, there's a certain limit to the people who are most in danger of dying, and there's a lot of people dying right now. Has to be looked at. That has to really be taken into account.
Well, what will be curious to track over the next couple of weeks, because I mean we're assuming that things are going to get wrapped up between the NHL and the PA at some point this upcoming week. Maybe that's optimistic, but I think that's probably,
that may still be optimistic, Mike. It's dragging.
Right. But the interesting thing will be whether players, like I was saying, anti-vaxxers who don't want to take the vaccine, whether players just simply will opt out. They're like, for example, we were talking a couple of days ago about Craig Anderson, who's a free agent right now. Craig Anderson, if he was under contract, might opt out this year because his wife is a recovering cancer patient. And they're more susceptible because of pre-existing conditions to getting infected. So whether there are players with young kids or whatever who will completely opt out of their contracts for this year, and how the NHL and the PA will address that in terms of the contract or in terms of money or whatever.
No, definitely. I think we should get on to something a lot more fun though, just for a second, just because, and I do think that, and because we have the divisions, right? The divisions have come out, and I think those are really interesting to talk about. They are the divisions actually that I projected right a while ago.
Well, but that's the interesting thing, because
that has changed now.
But it's even changed now too, right?
Right.
What this is now, so.
Mike Russo last night tweeted out that Minnesota is looking to move from what would deem to be the Central Division to the Pacific Division, flip-flopping with the Dallas Stars. And then Elliot Friedman this morning said Minnesota and St. Louis want to move to the Pacific, but that would mean another team from that division would have to move moved to the Central. So
you get to do this, just like, hey, I want to be in that division. Is that
there are travel considerations.
Yeah, it's a travel issue.
No, there are travel considerations for sure, but I mean, Dallas is one team that deserves first shot at that travel.
Yeah, because they have it worse. They've
always had it worse. They have the worst travel of any team in the NHL.
I mean, Marty Turco, anytime I've ever interviewed him, has always pointed that out. All the different time zones they'll play in all the time. It's hard to figure out when they're actually playing.
So the Canadian division is the Canadian division, and of course that's obvious. Right. The Eastern division is just taking Columbus and Carolina out and putting in Boston and Buffalo.
Right. This is the updated one with Philadelphia that ESPN
didn't have in there. Didn't have Philadelphia. Yeah.
Yes.
I heard all about that. But yeah, this has Philadelphia on it. So did we? I mean, what we're looking at? Minnesota and Dallas as the one.
Minnesota, either Minnesota or either Minnesota moving to the Pacific in either St. Louis or Dallas's place. So Minnesota would be with Anaheim, Arizona, Colorado, either Dallas or St. Louis, LA, San Jose, and Vegas.
Like more travel for Minnesota. Why would Minnesota want to do this?
Better chance to make the playoffs. I bet you.
Winning? I mean, because if it's just
I guarantee you, they ran a computer model and it came up like, hey, if we did this, our chances of being a playoff team with the expanded format are this rather than this. That's my skeptical mind goes to that.
Kevin, do you think they'll have any? I mean, I think these divisions feel pretty set.
I don't know though. I don't think they are set, but I guess it depends on what kind of case they make. I would suggest because they're not. Yeah. Nothing's in stone yet. I did hear something this morning though, which you don't haven't been talked about. The trade deadline, at least last I heard, was going to be at the exact period away from the end of the season that it usually is.
Right.
But what's been brought up, and you don't know what the landscape will look like, but it could look just like it is now. What that really means is if a Canadian team is going to be at a disadvantage, because if they trade for someone from below the demarcation line there, that guy's going to have to quarantine 2 weeks.
Well, if the players get the vaccine, then they won't have to quarantine.
They won't have the vaccine by then. We're talking that'll be
March probably.
March, they won't have it. Where they're not, the mainstream people aren't. Only the elderly and first responders are supposed to have it by March.
Right. Unless they purchase it privately, and then then they would have it. I mean, probably earlier than that. But
we're going to take them at their word and say that they won't do that. So
right. But Pierre LeBrun reported that there wasn't going to be any sort of not ban, but any sort of hindrance between Canadian and U.S. teams trading with each other, because which would I mean, if you're Toronto and you're limited to trading with the other 6 teams in your division,
you might not be able to. I mean, that is a fair point.
They will be able to.
I think that's a pretty big hindrance. That's 2 weeks.
I mean, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how they can prevent that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
It's pretty clear Canada is not going to waive that.
No,
I think that's a disadvantage. So
it is. I mean, you wouldn't trade for a goalie if you have to wait 2 weeks just to see the goalie. You're not going to do it.
Well, the CDC did come out last week and said that 14 days was excessive. That 7 to 10 days was acceptable. So maybe things are adjusted later on in the season.
Maybe, but even if you have to wait a week and then a bunch of negative tests. Sometimes you need that player quicker than that.
It could be, if the deaths go down and there's fewer cases. I mean, Canada could change it all, and then it won't matter. So
right, that's true.
Yeah, and I mean, the one disadvantage, and I've been railing about this and Act doesn't believe my assertion that 6 of the 7 Canadian teams would be likely playoff teams in the current or in the normal division setup. But the one disadvantage, 56 games for the 3 other divisions is a even split. It's 8 games against each team, 4 home, 4 away. It's nice and neat. With the Canadian teams, you're only playing 6 other teams. It's 10 games against 2 teams and then 9 against the other ones. And I would assume it's going to be based on geography. So, for example, Toronto would probably play Ottawa and Montreal 10 times, and then the teams in the West 9. You watched Edmonton, Calgary, Eck. By game 9, I don't know if there's going to be a player left because they're going to kill each other.
It'll be great. It'll be a lot of fun. It was funny last night when I was watching that game. They're like, well, there's another game we're in Hockey Night in Canada where we only have one anthem. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a fortuitous thing talking into the future. You're going to have a lot of games with one anthems coming up down the line.
I know press people in certain buildings that'll be very happy that it's only one anthem.
It's only one anthem in the whole league.
I've got to ask, at some point we're going to see a TV schedule. And so my basic point on that is, like, how many times is NBC going to show the Canadian division games? Like, I think they're going to cut down on them.
Only, when they'll show it, Russ? Toronto, Edmonton.
Yeah, I think there's only going to be 2 of them. I think Toronto, Edmonton. I think they'll show Edmonton, Calgary, and I'm not sure they're going to show much else.
Montreal's got a big following down here. That's the one thing I think.
That's all hate. That's all hate at.
No. There's a lot of Montreal fans.
Yeah, I mean, they'll show Montreal, but they're not going to show them a lot, I don't think.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, probably not. But I mean, California, there are more Canadians living in California than they're living in Canada right now.
They'll show Montreal, Toronto on Saturday night on NHL Network. But if you're talking about NBCSN or NBC,
that's what I'm talking about. The NBCSN game.
It's going to be Toronto, Edmonton. Maybe occasionally you'll sprinkle in Elias Pettersson in Vancouver for the late game, but it's going to be Toronto, Edmonton. That's it.
Maybe a whole lot of Philly, Pittsburgh, a whole lot of Boston, the Rangers.
Right. But the point was Canada.
I know, but what you're going to see in the U.S. I'm saying, yeah.
Like, are they basically going to pick, if they have one game that day, an 8:00 game, are they going to pick a Canadian game over something else happening in the U.S.? Probably not.
Not a chance in hell.
Yeah. Because they're going for regional. They're going for regional ratings, and that's not going to get them regional ratings, Zach.
No.
Yeah, so people in the U.S. are not going to get to see McDavid. They're not going to get to see Matthews.
I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I am just bringing it up because
no. I get it. I mean, I get. What are your thoughts? Do you think there's any chance we're going to get Canadian games on there?
I don't think we'll see many more than we saw last time. If you remember last year, they trumpeted the schedule because they included more teams, but it still wasn't a lot.
Right.
And so I don't, normally we don't see a lot of Canadians, so I don't think we're going to see a lot now.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, Elliot Friedman reported yesterday, and he talked about this a couple weeks ago, so I'm sure he had heard a trial balloon about this, that the NHL is investigating the possibility of ads on players' helmets, and I'm assuming also maybe goaltenders' masks. I have absolutely no problem with this. I mean, it's not. I hope it isn't going to get to the point where it's going to be like Europe and it's like they're a skating billboard. But I have no problem with this. And if they need to get more revenue this way, be my guest.
Yeah, no, I've long thought that we gotten too carried away about it. As long, I don't like messing with the jerseys just because that's part of the NHL tradition.
Right.
But helmets and sticks,
skates.
Skates, whatever else you can do.
Yeah, I'm fine with all that.
Yeah, me too. And especially now where, we got to get back to normal as quickly as possible. And, although I have heard recently that that some teams are petitioning to try to get some players or some fans in the building.
Yeah,
so,
I've heard that too.
I'm sure that's going to happen. I mean, there's
they're gonna try. I mean, there's not a lot of states where they can do it. But
no, Florida, obviously.
Tennessee, probably.
Tennessee, I would think.
Yeah.
Well, and the other concern, though, I mean, and this is something that's got to be, determined as we get closer to the potential January 13th start date, is municipalities like Santa Clara County, who, the 49ers had to move to Arizona for 2 weeks. And whether the San Jose Sharks, which is in Santa Clara County, can play. Now, I heard something where they were offered the availability of like the arena in Oakland, which is in Santa Clara, so they might be able to play there. But I don't know if it comes up to NHL specs. So that
I don't know if the NHL could be that picky right now.
I don't think there will be specs because right now it's the specs are really about the size of the
ice
arena, and it doesn't really matter.
Right, that's true.
You could play it at a community center. As long as the ice was good enough.
Well, I guess the big thing about that is all these arenas are suited for television, right? Like the idea here, you got to have a good broadcast. You want to have
yes.
The thing about the arenas is that they have the angles, they have all the cameras in place, they have all that.
If we had John Shannon on the show, I think he would tell you San Jose is known to have the worst angles in the NHL for television. The worst. So
still probably better than the El Camino skate zone or whatever it's going to go.
The big thing is they
San Luis Obispo
replay. Yeah, as long as we can get the downward shot or whatever they call it.
That. Yeah, there's a lot to putting this just into like your everyday arena. I think that's why, because obviously it would be cheaper for them to do it in I thought about this years ago.
Yeah, and they may not be the only one.
Let's go say like 6 months ago when we were talking about the bubbles, and I was saying, like, why don't you just play these in smaller arenas? Because it's way cheaper than opening up the giant buildings to play.
Yes, their offices are there. They have training facilities there with a lot of.
Our practice facilities, play in their practice facilities. For practice facilities, they've got all that stuff, and they've got they
don't have camera stations built in. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's the thing. So it's been cameras, so it's been the problem, right? So,
I think the Kings could end up having a problem. That we could be like a week away from the Kings saying the same thing. Like all of a sudden they got to go somewhere.
Everybody should just go to Arizona and we'll just all play the game. It's where they're not paying their rent.
Can I get a timeshare
for it?
I know it's I don't know. It's good.
There's still going to be more hiccups before the season starts. Here's
the thing that the fan base is certainly not going to care about, but we all care about. And on my podcast the other day, I asked Eric Aronson this. Are we ever going to get in a dressing room ever again?
I don't think so.
Well, I think so. I think in 2 years, not this year. I think the year after we will.
When we haven't been there in so long, it's going to feel so strange. And, the players are going to, they're used to it. I remember early on, people have forgotten this now. It was a long time ago. You used to be able to go into the NHL dressing rooms before the game.
Right.
The reason we lost it is it felt so strange. Like those of us who have been sports writers and covered other sports, when you go into a baseball dressing room before a game, it feels really natural because everybody's in there and they're used to doing it. But, I went in a couple of times and I was the only one in there. Everybody looks at you like, what the hell are you doing here?
Right. I never did it. Yeah.
And it was difficult. Like I got to the point where if I wanted a person, I would ask the PR person, see if he'd come and meet me out in the hallway because it was a better interview. You didn't feel self-conscious and, you felt like you're, that's what I'm worried about is going to happen here.
It's possible that we could all end up in in their bigger meeting rooms like the coach does. It is possible, but I think we're going to still be in the locker room, but not anytime this year. Obviously, this year, forget.
I think they could steer it. I think we're kidding ourselves if we think we're going to. I think it's going to go back to the way it was. Yeah. It's not going to go back to the way it was. I think you're going to be limited.
Okay.
I'll be able to get in. Other people, other people who've been around but there will be people. I guarantee you, this is another excuse for the NHL to cut off a lot of people.
I'm not that cynical yet.
This is what I think is going to happen. I think rights holders like Hockey Night in Canada are going to be able to have the in-person interviews
without saying,
right. But I think daily media, like I've been for a couple years in Toronto. I think we're going to be limited to being in the media room and sitting in seats with the players and the coaches up at the podium, and it's not going to be a scrum standing around players.
I don't know about that.
Let me bring this up because this was brought up to me by someone from a team. What's really come home to everyone is how unsanitary it is to have these scrums. And you know what I'm talking about. If you're in the third layer of a scrum trying to do Crosby, in most reporters are skilled at threading the needle with they put in, underneath someone's armpit, and then
I've got good reach. I do.
Elbow, and then down, and then you're standing there, and you got all sorts of appendages in front of you. You have no idea exactly that if he's still there.
Well,
right? But it's really just not. Especially in flu season, it's not a really good way to do it.
You know what? And that may be a thing, Kev. They may ask us to be vaccinated, and if we're not, then we're not allowed in.
Or Kev, all I know is that I made sure I did my upper body work before the beginning of the regular season to stretch and hold my arm for 2 or 3 minutes with the phone. But no, I mean, I know of reporters who, they have a cough drop in their mouth because they have a cold and they're not trying not to cough when everybody else is trying to record the player. I mean, you're going to go.
I think that goes without saying too. I think you're right. If someone does show symptoms, they're going to be like, you can't come in here. Right. But I also think they may ask us for proof of vaccination when we get our credentials, or if we want to go in, they may send it out when we get our credentials. Like, hey, if you want to be in the locker room, you have to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And to that person.
In Asia, Japan in particular, if you have a cold or something, you wear a mask.
Right. You just do. That's been commonplace. Yeah. I mean,
it's just the way you do it. I wonder if we're, because of all the mask wearing, whether we're going to,
They may do that. You might be right, Kev. They might just say, you have to wear a mask in the locker room to protect our players and yourselves. And if they say that, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, no, just make sure that you don't wear the mask unless the team gives you. Just make sure you're not wearing a Maple Leaf mask if you're going in the Maple Leaf locker room.
Yeah.
No, but I do think that's a legit thing. They may ask us to wear masks, and if that's the way to get back in, I think everybody would sign on for that.
Which is fine, yeah. But I do worry about the NHL like getting too used to stuff like this, like to go.
Nah, I don't. They've been pretty good about sending the message like, hey, it looks like that now, but it's not going to be. So that's an improvement for Mike for sure.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's the message they have been sending. But there are other people who have been around the block as long as I have who feel just like I do.
Right.
There's
right. I mean, Kevin, you're up, and Kevin's been the one who's had to.
And it's not unfounded. I get it. It's not unfounded. It isn't.
I mean, and also remember, the league is one thing. The league isn't really what counts when it comes to the locker room.
It's the individual team.
Yeah, it's the individual teams.
Yeah.
So and teams will all be different.
It's one of the great moments that I had when I was president of the writers. We actually had a meeting. It was all the beat writers who'd been around a lot. Scott Burnside was there, Pierre LeBrun was there. I believe Kevin DuPont was there. But I can't say for certain. But there was 7 or 8 of us, and we were talking with Gary about access in the finals. And I remember saying to Gary, you're the commissioner. Can't you, just step in? And he said, you would think it would work like that, wouldn't you? And, and he was being totally serious. And, what he was trying to say is that, teams who are competing for this, they'd rather take the fine than to give in on this.
Well, I mentioned this to Russ yesterday. One of the things I think will be interesting in terms of access for the upcoming season, if you think about it, there should be no cutback in terms of media access to the buildings, because if they are concerned about social distancing in the press boxes, there are no fans. They can set up a table in the concourse and have media sit there with their computer and be socially distant. So they shouldn't be cutting back media. And I think Russ made the point that they need the media more than ever this year. They need to promote this game and keep it in the public eye. So they shouldn't cut the media back.
I mean, honestly, when the game is back to having fans in, we don't know what the economy will be like for the average person, and we don't know what their ticket sales are going to be like as a result.
Yeah, I got a phone call.
They don't know, right, Kev? I don't think they will.
I got before we see sold out buildings.
Well, heck, it's funny. I got a phone call yesterday. I had purchased a ticket a few years ago in an opposition market to go see a Leaf game. They had me on their mailing list and phone list. I got a phone call from them yesterday asking if I was interested in buying a half season or a quarter season worth of season tickets. So that tells me that they're thinking at a certain point they're going to have fans this year.
Well, what's interesting to me is, and I don't, I can only relate this to my NFL experience, but I've been a Detroit Lions season ticket holder. My wife and I have been for, more than a decade. And, you rarely hear from the team. You get an occasional letter. And, of course, they always let you know when you owe your money.
Of course.
And all that kind of stuff. We have, in the last week, my wife and I have both gotten calls. We didn't pick it up to talk to them, but they left a message on our machine. They were just checking in to see how we are. Now, to me, that says they're concerned.
Yeah.
Listen, Matt Millen should have been calling your house with the way he was running that team. Make sure you'd still come.
They're concerned, and it's not just the Lions. I'm sure every team in North America is doing that. Just making sure, because there are some concerns, and I wrote a column about it, about the fact that television ratings, which they thought were going to be astronomical because we have so little to do, have turned out to actually be declining. So,
you forget how, how hard these like season ticket. Some buildings, some teams, of course, have no problem selling season tickets. But I was around the Predators a couple times when they've been on their season ticket drives, and teams like that are like, and they every ticket, that season ticket that comes in is like a celebration. Like they really it building up 2, 4, 6, 8 at a time is a big deal.
Well.
So then when you cut off, that's hard to build up, but the pandemic is really easy to tear that down.
I'll tell you what, it's probably torn down too, Ek. Yeah. I have no idea, because I don't have to report to a job where you need public transportation, but I'm assuming that most of them have cut down the schedules and trains and everything else. And when things start to ramp back up, you don't know how all in they're going to go until they sort of see how many people they actually are going to be servicing.
Well, Kevin, some people think that it was the fact that these seasons resumed in August and September, and that wasn't traditionally the time for the NBA and the NHL. But but there was also obviously the news about COVID and the presidential election in the states and how much attention that drew. So I don't know if they can draw the conclusions that I'm sure the NHL is very concerned because they're going into the last year of that contract with NBC, and they want to have good ratings to go and get a big contract from somebody.
Yeah, your points are all valid, and I mentioned all that, but it's just the concern about it. Like, they don't really know what's going to happen because we had the oddity of what was going on with the presidential race, as you said. Also, there was the political implications. People are mad at athletes for speaking out, and the fact that we were in off season. A lot of people were embracing home improvement projects. Some people had lost their jobs, so it's just hard to know kind of what the reason why the ratings are down, but they I'm sure they are concerned about it. We won't know until now. They got all of our money, so they know they're going to be pretty good this year. Right. The next time that we that we play, but it's what happens after that. The biggest one, I think, is, and I don't know whether your friends have said, but I've heard from people my age how much money those who are working have saved because they don't go anywhere.
Right.
Like, they're not eating out. Suddenly all this money, like, how much do we spend eating out all the time?
No. I'm still getting delivery and I'm picking up and driving through. I'm still doing that.
We were saving it. Well, we were saving some money because the pandemic obviously hurt the hockey buzz business, but with my wife's money, for sure. We were saving, but when it comes down to the whole aspect of, you do eventually start order. We didn't order in for a very long time. We went like months. I was the last in this whole panel to order out food. We were just buying from the grocery store and making our food and everything like that. But once you open that door to start ordering food, that's a tough one.
Yeah. let's just say the Chinese food that you buy from Wegmans is not close to the Chinese food you buy from.
No, and this is at the end of the day, Kev. This would still require me to cook more, and that's not happening. But I'm not traveling as much, so there is a savings on that. And same with my house.
Yeah, you're not driving as much.
Right.
You're not going to movies. You're not going to a ball game. You know,
concerts. Concerts cost a lot of money.
You're not doing that. You're not going over to a friend's house.
Right.
You're not going to the bar.
Nope.
I use a half a tank of gas every time I drive up to and back from Toronto, and I haven't done that since March. So I sent something out for all of us to finish out the show with, because Russ and I got into a conversation about. We mentioned Fabian Brunstrom yesterday, and he's could be the all-time, European free agent bust. The guy who everybody thought was, ballyhooed. People, number of teams were going after him, and then all of a sudden, he comes over, he gets a hat trick in his first NHL game, and then does nothing. And was just completely a bust. So
it's not based on how much money a team spent. It's just like expectations. Like, hey, we're getting this guy. We're bringing him here. He's been really good in this league. He's going to be really good for us.
So I got a few of them. I don't know if Russ.
I got 5. I even ranked them.
Yeah. And Kevin, I'm sure you have a few. I don't know if you did it, but I've got. I'll start with the obvious one from the Maple Leaf perspective. Jonas the Monster Gustafsson.
Yeah.
Brian Burke talked this guy up like he was the Swedish Patrick Waugh.
Just that nickname was bad.
He had great stats in the SHL. Now, and to his defense, he had a heart ablation procedure. He had an arrhythmia with his heart that knocked him out for a while. But he would have 2 good games, and he'd had 2 games where he would absolutely kill them. He's on my list.
He's number 3 on my list.
Okay.
Yeah, he was mine. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you my number 5. My number 5 is maybe lesser known, but I'm sure the Calgary Flames had some hopes for David Wolf. He came over in 2014. He had 293 goals in the DEL, and I'm sure they were hoping he'd score a few here.
Yeah.
He ended up playing like a full season at Adirondack, had 168 PIMs. He became more of an enforcer than an actual goal scorer, and he played 3 games for Calgary. That's it.
Russ, I saw David Wolf when he was a training camp invitee to the Leafs training rookie camp, and somebody mentioned Tyler Biggs. He got into a fight with Tyler Biggs and David Brohl in the training camp. He didn't look like he really had a lot of talent other than he could fight.
No, but in the DEL, he scores goals like he just does.
Yeah, that's what happens, right?
The funny thing about Fabian Brunstrom is, he's still only 35 years old, but the most goals he ever scored was actually in the NHL in one season. He had 17 for Dallas that first year, and he never scored that many in Sweden or anywhere.
Wow.
He was definitely the first YouTube darling, was that's really, without YouTube, does the Fabian Brunstrom thing happen the way it,
I'm going to go way back in the Wayback Machine, and I'm going to talk about Edwin Knudsen.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
No, he was the sensation. Shampoo was his nickname in Norway because of his hair. And he came, he was a real, he was said to be the best player ever in Norway, and came over here, played in Columbus. And they really thought he was going to be, I don't know if people thought he would be a superstar, but they thought he'd score some goals over here because he was, a pretty skilled player, but it never really worked out. He just never.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's
okay.
Well,
I'll give my number 2 because some of the others were mentioned already. My number 2 is actually Evgeny Medvedev. He was the top scoring defenseman in the KHL all time, and he came over to the Flyers, and he was a little older. He was like 31, 32, something like that. And if you want to talk about a guy who just didn't fit in, they could not find a spot for him anywhere on the ice. He had maybe 1 or 2 good games. That's it.
Yeah, he didn't really seem to want to be here. It was one of those situations, I don't know why he was even here. When you were talk to we can talk to him directly, but just the attitude and everything, it just didn't seem like he wanted to be here at all.
Yeah.
Well, I have 2 of them that I'd put in the same category. Players who were fantastic internationally, came over with a reputation and came over to the NHL, and for one reason or another made a very brief debut and then went back to Europe. The first one was a member of the KLM line, which was Vladimir Krutov.
Yeah, he's on my list.
Who came over with the Canucks and apparently ate British Columbia.
He was big. That's what Mike and I were talking about yesterday. Krutov was big, man.
Yeah, and he was Makarov had a great career in a pretty good career in the NHL. I think he won. Did he win?
He won the Calder. He was the oldest.
They changed the rules.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And Larionov, obviously, with San Jose and Detroit, he played really well, but Krutov never made the conversion. Now this one, Kevin, I'm not sure if you remember this guy. He was a star with the Czech national team, played in the Olympics, I think in 76 and 80, played in the Canada Cup, came over to the Washington Capitals in 82. Milan Novi.
Yeah, I do remember.
Oh, that one I don't know.
Yeah, he played 1 year with the Caps, scored 38 points, and went right back to Europe. And I looked it up because I remember because I was playing Stratomatic hockey at the time. And somebody drafted him, and I knew who he was, but basically he couldn't take the physical nature of the NHL and went back to Europe as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
I'll mention my number one. Eck will certainly like it. He's from the Czech Republic. My Sportsology was there to cover it, but not with
where you're going.
Writer. When Yuri Depita came on the scene for
the funky called Depita, we used to call him.
Yeah, and Bobby Clark would say he's the best player not in the NHL.
Not playing in North America.
NHL, and then he did it for one game.
Yeah, he looked good.
Well, my last guy that hasn't been said already was, and it was just recent. Shipachyov. Was really still scoring in the KHL.
He had 700 points. He's like the top scorer in the KHL. He just got his 700 points.
Still top player, but came over here and just couldn't cut it with the and just wasn't willing to work at it. And I think his wife too struggled to acclimate as well. And that's too bad because he's a pretty skilled player. Just want to, not everybody, wants to come to a strange world, which is
right. That's exactly true. I mean, the lad, especially the guys from the Czech Republic the Czech Republic, the Slovaks, something like that, they go home when the season's done. Immediately. That's what you can tell. That's the big difference with some of the players from overseas. Like, a lot of the Finns and Swedes will go home too, but those guys are out of here immediately. And they want to be out of here. My guy is Flyers and Rangers fame, Pavel Brendel.
Yeah. Well, no, he was drafted though.
He was
drafted. Yeah. That's true. It's true, but still, he's still.
He's a massive bust, but he was drafted. That's all.
He's a massive bust.
He was a really highly touted player.
The one thing I could tell people about Brendel that I remember. I had just gotten into this area. Clearly, I knew about him with the Rangers and Neil Smith talking him up. But when he became a Flyer, they were showing this revolutionary new thing, the skating machine, and they were like, "Look at Pavel Brendel, look at him go!" And I'm like saying to other people, "This is the most skating he's actually ever done." Fast forward to the Philadelphia Phantoms, and after a game one night, I sat down next to Brendel in the locker room and started to ask him what went wrong in the game. And he goes, "Listen, I'm done." I'm like, "What do you mean you're done?" He goes, "I'm retiring." I'm like, "Okay." And then I went on to the next guy. Like, that was it. It was like, there's nothing else to ask.
There's no coming back from that.
No. And there was no Twitter to put Pavel Brendel just told me he retired. It was just like, all right.
The last one I have is another Leaf one, and I think I mentioned it yesterday, but it's notable. He played every game of his NHL career except one for the Leafs. He played one game for Detroit, and that was Miroslav Ináček. Now, he was the younger brother of Peter Ináček, who was a second-line center for the Leafs. He was drafted in like the 9th round, and it was like he's the best guy in the Czech Republic that's not in the NHL. And he comes over, first game at the Forum in Montreal, and he scores 2 goals, and it's like Ináček mania. And then I think he scored 3 goals in like 35 games.
I'll tell you who could have been that guy. Joel Lundqvist, had the Rangers ever actually signed him, but I'm pretty sure he practiced with the team. Like when he'd come, he'd go see Henrik, and I'm pretty sure he had been on the ice. but clearly would never have been able to play in the NHL.
Good call. Good topic.
Speaking of checks,
yes,
there's always these players and coaches and things. When you read their age, it makes you feel old. Peter Klima is 55 years old now.
Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah.
My
Boy,
God.
he got old.
I still remember him like not playing in that overtime game in Boston with the blackout, and then he plays in the overtime and scores the winning goal.
Well, he had legs. Nobody else had legs.
Well, we have breaking news here. This is big news, actually.
Go over it.
So Bob McKenzie tweeted, the real Bob McKenzie, I'm making sure, but Anthony put it up, so I believe it. Interesting situation developing that may, I guess he meant may be nothing, but he put a dash. Nothing's official quite yet, meaning Team USA could be without Nick Robertson for the World Juniors. So we don't know why. Mike had told me, Mike, you said that Robertson was located in Canada, right?
Yeah, he stayed in Toronto after the Leafs were eliminated, and what this might be, it might be the fact the Leafs are not going to let him go.
It could be a last minute, we're pulling him back thing. Yeah.
Right. If the training camp starts January 1st or January 2nd, which supposedly it will for a January 13th start date, the World Junior goes from Christmas Day to the 5th of January. So they may say, well, we're saying we're not going to let him go because fear of getting infected or fear of getting hurt, or maybe they think he's going to make the team.
Well, it's good that they are saying it now before they make the final cuts. That's good, because now somebody else could at least make the team before Team USA had decided to make their final cuts.
Yeah. Interesting. All right,
that's a big loss for them if they don't have them.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to talk about next time when we have Kevin is the Olympics, because it is in the CBA that the NHL players are going to go. And then last night I was watching That's Hockey in Canada, because like I said, I was flipping around some Canadian television, and they were talking about how the Canadian brass is already meeting and stuff like that, and the U.S. brass hasn't met at all because there's no agreement, there's no
right.
It's 400 days away.
Yeah, Doug
which is not, which it sounds like a lot of time away.
No, in Olympic life, it's not. You're right.
Doug Armstrong is supposedly the leading candidate to be the GM.
They don't even have it. They don't even have that yet.
Darren Drager reported that this morning. But the thing is, though, the question is whether they'll bring back Babcock for a third straight Olympics.
I don't think they will.
I don't think they will either.
No, definitely not. All right, thank you, Kevin. Have a great weekend.
All right, sounds good.
You got the Santa beer going there. I'm hoping you're going to be at Santa. They're looking good. Yeah,
so I'm going to shave it off on Christmas Day. So.
All right. Remember Without the Buzz.
After I get back from my rounds.
I can't wait.
There you go.
And this is great. I love it. Remember Without the Buzz. It's just